Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of 2007's Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Ahead of the homecoming of Marvel's first family in the MCU in 2025, we are looking back at the legacy of Fantastic Four film adaptations to see what lessons Kevin Feige is carrying over from these films that, yes, he was an executive producer of. And this movie, like its predecessor, is not perfect. It did depict Galactus as a big old cloud in space, but it does have a lot of fun Easter eggs, and it definitely has better action than its predecessor. So let's break down everything in this movie, along with some lessons at the end of this video that I think they're definitely going to apply to the MCU Fantastic Four film, especially since they're going to be bringing in Galactus and Silver Surfer. Okay, over the opening titles, the flipping pages of the Marvel Comics features some stills from Fantastic Four issues with a lot of images coming from the main Fantastic Four comic books in 2004 and 2005 that were written by Mark Waid with artwork from the late Mike Waringo. Now, Brandon Barrick went through this frame by frame to try to identify every comics image, and he actually found a lot of them, and it's pretty interesting to see what he found. But if you find this list to be exhaustive and you just want to skip to where the movie starts, skip to this point in our breakdown. We see The Thing from Marvel Knights 4 number 7, an image of a fist, which is actually the fist of Galactus from Fantastic Four 519, Human Torch from Fantastic Four 515, a flaming four in the sky, something that we saw at the end of the very first movie from Fantastic Four 517, Mr. Fantastic being stretchy from Fantastic Four 515, The Thing from the cover of Ultimate Fantastic Four number 14, Sue Storm from Marvel Knights 4 number 7, and another of Sue from Ultimate Fantastic Four number 8, Reed and Sue from Fantastic Four 519, right before Reed has to blast Sue with a cannon that will swap her powers with Johnny, and we'll see some power swapping happen in this film. Another shot of Sue from Fantastic Four 517, panels from Fantastic Four number 516, the team fighting together in Fantastic Four 518, the Invisible Woman from Fantastic Four 518, Hydra Man getting blasted in Fantastic Four 516, Reed in Fantastic Four 518, another Reed from Fantastic Four 518, The Thing helping a construction worker in Marvel Knights 4 number 10, New York City getting attacked by Galactus in Fantastic Four 519, Reed fighting Hydra Man in Fantastic Four 516, Johnny Storm in Fantastic Four 519, Human Torch's eyes from the cover of Human Torch Volume 3 number 11, a panel of the Fantastic Four battling Galactus with the help of Quasar from Fantastic Four 522, Human Torch from Ultimate Fantastic Four number 8, The Thing from Fantastic Four number 518, Mr. Fantastic still beating on Hydra Man in Fantastic Four 515, The Thing from Fantastic Four 517, two shots of The Thing from the cover of Marvel Knights 4 number 10, a shot of Sue getting hit by Reed's power swapping gun in Fantastic Four 519, The Thing from Marvel Knights 4 number 7, a shot from a retrofitted space shuttle that the team used to enter the negative zone in Ultimate Fantastic Four number 14, a panel from Fantastic Four 514, and finally a shot of Dr. Doom from the cover of Fantastic Four Volume 2 number 5. They used this same Doom image in the logo sequence in the first film. Okay, so like the first film, the Marvel logo itself is blue, the Fantastic Four signature color. Rise of the Silver Surfer is actually the first Marvel film since Howard the Duck to be given a PG rating, and Howard the Duck only has that rating because, you know, this is like before PG-13 was invented, and it probably should have had PG-13 because there's like duck boobies in that. But all the other Marvel movies up until this point were rated PG-13, like Spider-Man and the X-Men films, or rated R, like the Blade films. But this film opens on an unknown planet destroyed by an entity, and this entity is later revealed to be Galactus. We see land masses with green vegetation withering away, and the oceans drain into these Swiss cheese type holes in the crust. And as the planet cracks like an egg, the cloudy tendrils of Galactus are left looking like the closing fingers of a fist around this planet's remains. So in the comics, Galactus is a giant cosmic entity that consumes planets in order to survive, the devourer of worlds, who sees his duty as kind of like an ultimate custodian who keeps the universe in balance by doing this. Before this film, the final Galactus design wasn't completed until very late in the process, and initially Laurence Fishburne was cast to provide the voice of the space god. And who better to voice Galactus than the voice of Morpheus? But that was scrapped when it was decided that Galactus would not speak in this film, and Fishburne instead provided the voice for the Silver Surfer, much to the surprise of Doug Jones, the actor physically portraying the Silver Surfer, who reportedly did not realize he was going to be dubbed over in the finished version until he saw the film. At the time, director Tim Story decided not to depict Galactus as he was in the comics because he apparently refused to put, quote, giant robots in his films, although Galactus is not a robot. He was formerly a mortal Gallon of Ta from the Sixth Cosmos, who was approached by his universe's precursor to eternity and fused with that essence to pass on to the next universal cycle, the Seventh Cosmos, the one we live in, where he emerged as the godlike Galactus with his big antler helmet after an incubation period. Tim Story decided to go with the giant gaseous cloud instead of a physical being. He recently shifted the blame for the much maligned villain design to higher ups Voss and admitted it was a mistake, saying, quote, "The ones in charge were afraid of what that could be, and so, that's not the interpretation it should have been." He's also gone on to claim that the cloud wasn't actually supposed to be Galactus's true form, and it was just a cloud that followed in Galactus's wake. And instead, you can see a shadow of Galactus's antlered helmet on one of the planets he passes later by in the film. According to writer Don Payne, this movie was influenced by the Fantastic Four comic, the Galactus trilogy, Fantastic Four issues 57 through 60, and the Ultimate comic, Ultimate's Extinction. Interestingly, that Galactus trilogy are among those issues Marvel Studios instructed to read via their 4-4-day Human Torch poster release. As of this taping, Galactus has not been confirmed for the MCU 2025 film, but he is expected to appear in it, with Javier Bardem or Antonio Banderas rumored to voice the character. So we see the Silver Surfer flying away from this ruined planet, so fast that he just looks like a whitish blur, kind of like a comet. The 4 in this film's title design, you'll notice, is the same shiny silver metal as the Silver Surfer's anatomy. In Suruga Bay, Japan, a bay on the Pacific coast of Honshu, known for being an excellent fishing region, the Silver Surfer flies by a group of fishermen, freezing the water solid, even mid-wave. That's how fast he froze it. One of the fishermen is played by Peter Kawasaki, who also played a photographer in X-Men The Last Stand. The Silver Surfer zooms by the Sphinx and the Pyramids of Giza, startling a group of tourists and covering everything in snow and frost. And then finally, he hits Los Angeles, causing massive blackouts, turning off the lights of a Los Angeles Dodgers game. And that's gonna be madness on the 405. A local Fox affiliate report says that the FAA was forced to ground all flights due to electrical patterns, and then it moves on to the news of Sue and Reed's wedding with the headline, "Fourth time's a charm," because their wedding keeps getting delayed from them being superheroes. And I like how that was clearly the second story after the blackouts, and later on Sue Storm was like, all these crazy things happening around the world and all people can talk about is our wedding. You were the second story, Sue. They did have their priorities right. Just, a lot of movies like to go after the media, and a lot of times media is just kind of covering news as it comes. Okay, so at the airport, Reed reads his newspaper with the headline, "Reed Richards, scientist or celebrity," and another that says, "Something's fishy in the water," about bluegill fish being used to detect changes in reservoir water as an early indication of a terrorist attack. A story on the opposite page reads, "Scientists may be fighting a losing battle in their efforts to keep pace with the fast rate of change to mountain environments caused by rising temperatures. These are obviously concerns that will become moot if the Silver Surfer freezes Earth and lets the gaseous cloud destroy it." We learn that Sue has been upgraded to the Invisible Woman after her brother labeled her the Invisible Girl in the previous film. We see Johnny Storm flirting with some ladies while Ben Grimm signs autographs for kids as some fans in Fantastic Four shirts take pictures with cameras. Cameras! Can you imagine? There were no smartphones back then. Ben is kind enough to give the kids some of his rock dust, which is just like, is that your skin flaking off, dude? But notice how Ben is wearing an old school Brooklyn Dodgers Letterman jacket before the team moved to Los Angeles. Yancey Street represent! And I kind of wonder, was he at the LA Dodgers game last night? And everyone's just like, boo, we got the team now. And he's like, ah! Now the Thing costume for the sequel was more comfortable for Michael Chiklis, since a new set of prosthetics were made that were much less hot and much easier to remove. The costume from the first film took 6 hours to get on, but this one much faster. They also enlarged the costume's brow and shoulders, so it's more accurate to the Thing's depiction from the comics. Ben lifts some twins up for a photo, and the one on the left looks directly into the camera. Now on this flight, Ben gets stuck with a middle seat in coach. The first film established that he was too heavy for an elevator. Do we think the airline took his weight into consideration for this flight? It's overbooked. Reed stretches his arm to put his suitcase in an overhead bin when it definitely would have fit beneath the seat in front of him. While Johnny decides last minute that rather than flying coach, he's just gonna piss off the pilots for the whole flight, and for Ben Grimm, reenact terror at 20,000 feet. In New York City, the camera passes by the Statue of Liberty and then the W Hotel, and then you also see an ad for the musical Rent, as well as Tarzan the Musical, which ran from 2006 to 2007. That's right, Disney has always been there just biding their time until they could scoop up the Fantastic Four. At the corner of East 48th and 3rd, a Circuit City TV plays news of the global climate events and has an angle of the Japanese fishing boat that matches the cinematography of this film. So did one of those fishermen, maybe the photographer in The Last Stand, kind of walked out on the frozen waves and took a picture of it. And the Circuit City product placement did nothing to stop Circuit City going bankrupt and closing all of its stores 2 years after this movie came out. The top of the Baxter building now has a 4 logo on the roof made from the glass panels, so this 4 would only be visible from above, like passing planes or satellites, or from space, like, a Galactus cloud looking down, and would not be visible from anyone on the street level. And this building certainly has a different look, both outside and inside, from the first film. Sue goes over a bill from the city's squad cards that they destroyed while stopping an armed car robbery. Reed ignores her while working on his Nokia PDA, which was clearly a big thing from this time because, they show it a lot. And what seems like this movie's way of hanging a lantern on the abundance of product placements, Johnny has gone full NASCAR with their uniforms, with logos for Gillette and Ray-Ban, Keebler, Dodge, Nokia, Dell, Dos Equis, and Crunch Bar. Sue says,
I think there's no way we're wearing that, Johnny.
What do you have against capitalism?
Now, it was established in the first film that their suits can only handle their powers because they too were exposed in that moment the cosmic radiation hit their bodies. So wouldn't those patches added to the uniform immediately burn up the second Johnny flames on? I think he's secretly an anarchist and wants to make a performance art statement by burning the brands of America. A deleted scene would have shown Johnny at the Fantastic Four store checking out his merch.
You gotta put the Human Torches on the top shelf. They're our best seller.
Actually, the Thing figure's outselling all the others put together.
Now we get this goofy scene with Johnny, now John, and Reed rolling back and forth across the workspace, avoiding talk about the bachelor party while Reed drops some exposition that the Silver Surfer is powered by the same cosmic radiation that gave them their powers, to set up how physical contact with them results in the anomalistic power swapping B-plot of this film. The Silver Surfer flies over Hassenstadt, Latveria. In the comics, the capital city of Hassenstadt will become Doomstadt when Doom takes over the country, but we're not there yet. At the end of the first film, Victor was being loaded into a shipping container on the boat back to his home country, and now I guess no one unloaded him from the crate. But also in the storage room, we see a quick shot of a painting. This is St. George Slaying the Dragon by Carlo Crivelli from around the year 1470. In the first film, Victor had two paintings in his office of soldiers on horseback. This guy loves horse paintings. St. George here is also wearing medieval armor, so perhaps that is how Victor sees himself in the Doctor Doom gear, as some sort of heroic knight, especially considering that as the camera zooms in on Victor in his crate, he's flanked by two sets of armor. Johnny went overboard for Reed's bachelor party. Beside Ben at the bar is this guy with the huge fro, who's clearly just cast so that his hair would wave in the wind of Ben's burp. Meanwhile, at the Baxter building, Kevin McNulty is back as Jimmy the doorman, rocking a beard, and thankfully surviving Victor tossing him through the glass for no reason. General Hager arrives, played by the late, great Andre Braugher. Braugher turned down a supporting role on ER to appear in this film. He runs into Roberta, the hologram receptionist. In the comics, Roberta is the robot receptionist of the Fantastic Four and was introduced in number 239 back in 1981, 3 years after Herbie first appeared in the animated series. But we don't really get to meet her that much in this film, unfortunately. Reed is more interested in talking nerdy to the women.
When the universe began, it was no bigger than a marble. And then, bang! It exploded. And in a trillionth of a second, it expanded exponentially to what became the universe we know today.
I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed by the VFX of Ioan Gruffudd's fingers, and I'm not sure how they really did this. Like, the woman on his side is holding his arm, so this is the actor's actual arm up to the point of the wrists, and you can see the actor's actual practical mouth behind his expanded fingers. So yes, it does look cartoony, and the VFX was obviously involved. I just think that it really blends well with the practical environment. Also, while talking about the Big Bang, Reed is unknowingly describing the death of Galactus's previous universe and his birth into this one. Reed loosens up by twisting his body in his version of dancing, and it's kind of fun. I'm not sure how his regular clothes stretch as well after the first movie clearly established that only their suits can move with their bodies like that. And Johnny later gets to keep his shirt when he things out, and Ben only has like a few holes burned into his shirt. Sue Storm seems to be the only one of the four to suffer from wardrobe malfunctions in these movies, and it's not fair. Hager and Sue crash the bachelor party to catch Reed dancing, and Ben repurposes his catchphrase.
I think it might be clover in time.
Sue asks Reed if he wants to do jello shots off someone's stomach, and why would you do jello shots off someone's stomach? They come in little paper cups, and you're like, there's no need for like a stomach to balance a shot glass, to tip something, whatever. Now, Reed has this really funny line saying that he was explaining the Big Bang to the girls, but then they cut away from Ioan when he says that, which is a shame because bang is a poor choice of words when trying to explain himself to his fiance. I also don't know why she's grilling him right now about this when later she says she's not even mad at him for this. She's actually just mad about him continuing to run experiments without telling her. Johnny immediately hits on the only woman in Hager's team, Captain Frankie Ray. Now in the comics, Frankie Ray is a UN interpreter who dates Johnny Storm and is revealed to be the stepdaughter of Phineas Horton, and as a kid she was doused with chemicals that caused the original android Human Torch to burst into flames, and later she serves as the Herald of Galactus and takes on the name Nova. This is after Richard Rider, the original Nova, left that name behind, but Richard Rider would later reacquire that name after a time being known as Kid Nova. Hager shows the Fantastic Four photos of craters that have been appearing all around the world wherever the Silver Surfer has been. Reed says that they need to build a sensor to figure out where the next one will appear, but tells a very pissed off Hager that he's too busy with the wedding. But it turns out Reed is just saying that for Sue's benefit, and he's totally working on the sensor on the side in his free time. Now, Reed's sensor atop the Baxter building that we see later on the roof could be a nod to the antenna that the Silver Surfer uses on top of the Baxter building in the Galactus trilogy of the Fantastic Four comics in the late 60s that he uses to summon Galactus. In this movie, it's not anything on the Baxter building that the Silver Surfer uses. He really just disables that, and it's his board that summons Galactus. The deleted scene would have shown a montage of Johnny and Ben helping out with the wedding. What's it gonna do? What's it gonna do? What's it gonna say? But fun. Outside the wedding, the crowd is filled with fans and kids dressed up as the Thing and a flaming Johnny Storm. Johnny's date is played by Vanessa Lachey, who is married to Nick Lachey, and the two now co-host Netflix's Love is Blind, making America increasingly cynical about love and marriage. The topper on the wedding cake has little Reed's arms wrapped around an invisible-looking little Sue, and after his cameo as mail carrier Willie Lumpkin in the first film, this time Stan Lee actually plays himself.
Invitation, sir.
I should be on that list.
Name?
Stanley.
Yeah, nice try, buddy.
No,
Nice
no,
try.
really.
This is taken from the Fantastic Four Annual 003 from 1965, when both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby get turned away from Reed and Sue's wedding. At the time, breaking the fourth wall in comics was a rare move, so readers were delighted by this. But in the context of this movie, it does establish that Stan Lee exists and is a known celebrity in this world as a writer of comics. Alicia Masters, Kerry Washington returning, is Sue's maid of honor, because I guess Sue doesn't have any other friends that she's known for more than a couple months. Sue wonders how it would be possible to have kids amidst all this celebrity chaos. Now in the comics, Sue and Reed Richards do eventually have kids, Franklin and Valeria Richards. Franklin has the ability to warp reality, and Valeria has super genius level intellect. And in the 838 universe of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, John Krasinski Reed Richards does imply that he and Sue Storm have kids. So Susan composes herself and wipes away a tear. According to Jessica Alba, director Tim Story had issues with the way Jessica Alba cried throughout the movie. In an interview, she said, "He told me it looks too real, it looks too painful. Can you be prettier when you cry? Cry pretty, Jessica." He was like, "Don't do that thing with your face, just make it flat. We can CGI the tears in." Boo! So just think about that when you criticize Jessica Alba's acting in this movie. She wanted to act better, but this bad performance really took a village. But you know what? I do appreciate this meta joke in the scene where Susan has to concentrate on making the zit invisible for 4 hours. It's kind of like how these actors had to really concentrate on the VFX that would later be painted over them. Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of the trailer for Spider-Chum, which will finally answer the question of what exactly happened to all the people who just kind of like spiders, but don't have any superpowers beyond not being grossed out by how many eyes they have. Seriously, spiders have 8 eyes. Isn't that wild? Most of those eyes aren't even helping with depth perception. So what are they seeing? Ultraviolet radiation? The polarization of light? Some kind of special arachnid aura that humans can't even imagine? Marshmallow? Honey? Peppermint? Oh man, this is so much better. Wait, what the hell is Spider-Chum? No matter what you're talking about, if you're talking a lot, One Shot Energy's voice drops can be the relief your throat needs. Go to oneshotenergy.com/newrockstars to get 10% off your order. Now at this point in the movie, Johnny does ask the big question of Ben.
How do you guys,
That's none of your business.
Okay, all right, I'm just concerned. I'd hate to wake up one morning and find out she was killed in a rock slide.
And yes, Johnny is pretty immature once again in this movie, and while the other members of the Fantastic Four are in committed relationships, Johnny just seems to be loose and wandering. But I do have to admit, it does set up this decent arc for him in this movie to eventually find purpose through the Silver Surfer, and later assume all of the other powers in order to confront Doom. Johnny tells his sister that she looks beautiful, and their dad would be proud. Now, in the comics, their father was Dr. Franklin Storm, a surgeon who gave up medicine after he failed to save his wife's life after a car crash. He then got heavy into gambling and got into a fight with a loan shark's henchman who accidentally shot himself dead. Franklin Storm went to prison over it and was so ashamed that he told Susan not to visit him and to tell her brother that he had died. Now, the minister at their wedding is played by comedian Brian Posehn. Reed's PDA keeps going off to alert cosmic radiation detection. The power in New York goes out, and the paparazzi helicopter hovering over the ceremony also loses power and almost chops the wedding guests to bits. This is why you don't have rooftop weddings if you're a celebrity in New York City. But also, you know, especially after 9/11, there's no way they would let helicopters fly this low in Manhattan. Anyway, it gives us a chance to see Reed stretching to save some guests. Susan creates a force field to block the helicopter, and Ben rips off the tail to save Alicia. But notice how when Johnny has to flame on, the first thing that burns is his lapel flower, and then the rest of the Dolce suit, because no flowers for Vanessa Lachey in this movie, or any flowers for any wedding plus one, because Johnny's a heartbreaker. And Susan cries over the ruined wedding, but you know, I have to ask, why wouldn't Minister Brian Posehn just pick back up with the vows? They can quickly finished them. The guests are still there. There's a couple seats still standing. But then we get this awesome sequence where Johnny chases the Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer phases through the Chrysler building, and Johnny can't help but respect this.
Oh, that is cool.
But you gotta wonder, is he really saying it looks cool because he's got those American flags waving behind the Silver Surfer in this shot that they knew would be in the trailer because this was the 2000s. And after that final shot of Spider-Man where he's like clinging to the American flagpole, they just had to work in American flags everywhere. And we all bought it because that's what we wanted. Also notice how behind Johnny is the MetLife building, which, fun fact, is the address in Manhattan where the MCU would later place Avengers Tower. I just gotta appreciate how the creative team of this movie looked at all the buildings of New York City as this kind of playground. Like Silver Surfer literally surfs down the Grace building that's known for its curved out walls in the lower levels that make it look like a wave, and glass is kicking up like water. It looks so cool. Johnny chases him into the tunnel where Norrin Rad phases through a bus, but not hurting anyone or doing any damage whatsoever, because that's not his goal. Compare this to, like, you know, anytime Zod or Omni-Man from Invincible would pass through a city. Most advanced aliens really don't care what they break, but not this guy. It should tell us right here that the Silver Surfer is not the enemy of the movie. Doug Jones' prosthetic suit was developed by practical effects company Spectral Motion, along with the new digital VFX program from Weta Digital, that's Peter Jackson's company, which helped augment the Silver Surfer's reflective surface. Doug Jones, in addition to being an actor, is also a mime and a contortionist, and he played a ton of other creatures and things, including the Fawn in Pan's Labyrinth and the main amphibian man in The Shape of Water. And of everything that holds up in this movie, the Silver Surfer looks great. He's awesome in this movie, but Johnny proves to be outmatched, and the Silver Surfer grabs him by the throat and takes him up to the upper atmosphere, depriving Johnny's flames of oxygen. So without any oxygen to burn, no fire. So he drops Johnny, who crashes down in the desert. And one of the fun things about this movie is they did hide some hidden Mickey 4s throughout the film. And the coolest one is right here, right next to Johnny's head. It's kind of hard to see, but when he turns his head, he's basically looking right at a number 4. Silver Surfer looks out into a star-filled space.
Your herald summons you. Another world awaits. Let it be done quickly.
Now, we don't see Galactus or even the Cloud of Galactus, but there is a bright yellow star in the distance that he could be talking to. And he says, do it quickly, because he feels bad for these Terrans. Meanwhile, Reed debriefs everyone.
Evidently, this entity, this Silver Surfer, didn't want to be detected. It destroyed the sensor.
I like how Reed checks in with Johnny when it comes to coming up with a nickname, because it was Johnny Storm who named everyone in the previous film. And to force Reed to listen to her, Sue stops him with a force field in front and then another that smushes him from behind, which I interpret as a goofy version of Ripley forcing Dallas to talk to her, an alien, by closing the door in front of him. Tom Skerritt would never let his face be smushed in like that. Johnny tries to flame out his soreness, but he falls off the Baxter building, and Sue touches her brother, swapping their powers. Now, I wasn't sure initially why Susan would float in addition to catching fire, because Johnny seems to need like speed in order to fly and propel forward like a rocket. But I guess at the end of the day, heat does rise. Johnny tries to save her.
Hey, watch it.
Yeah, invisible or not, if you stop in the middle of a sidewalk in New York City, the New Yorkers will slam into you like this. Now, there's a weird edit where Reed sees Sue up on a higher level, and then it seems like within seconds, he's down on the sidewalk. Johnny grabs her arm, and they swap back, making this the second Fantastic Four movie that forces Jessica Alba to be naked in public. Looking back, I get the times, right? You know, Tim Story probably found this kind of sophomore humor hilarious. And I'm sure there are people in the audience who were like, yeah, more of this. But it's also just like a really weird assumption that this would be part of what it means to be the Invisible Woman. Like, Kevin Feige, you were an executive producer on this movie. Why didn't you put a stop to this? It just makes you wonder how many other battles was Kevin Feige fighting, and this was what, like, he had to compromise with. Or maybe he was just like, you know what? I just want money, and I just want these movies to do well, and I know what American audiences want right now. I mean, just a year after this, he would begin Iron Man by having Tony Stark lure into bed a Vanity Fair reporter. It's really just reflective of where American audiences were at this point in history. But Ben swaps powers with Johnny just to mess with him, and the Thing version of Johnny is so great. Like, he still looks like Chris Evans, but like Tom Brady Chris Evans. Sue and Reed discuss leaving the superhero life behind, and it's pretty similar to the conversation that Scott Summers and the woman who turns out to be Madeline Pryor have in the first episode of X-Men 97. Both couples are motivated by the fact that they think raising a family isn't really conducive to living this superhero life. Johnny overhears this and sulks and tattles on them to Ben, snitch, who also just is weirdly affected by this.
What do they expect us to do? Keep it going, just the two of us?
And call ourselves what? The dynamic duo.
Yeah, a little Batman and Robin reference there. One of the rare moments when a Marvel movie references a DC property. In this rec room, I like the detail that the weight bar is bent from Ben's ability to lift insane amounts that the bar cannot keep up with. There's also Hydro Thunder Midway arcade game that's a boat racing game, and one of the boats you use in it is shaped very much like the Silver Surfer's board. Victor Von Doom tracks the Silver Surfer to the Russell Glacier in Greenland. The studio apparently hated Dr. Doom's makeup in this movie, so they keep his face hidden under a cowl and a hood for this part of the movie, but you can kind of see it, especially in like 4K. It just kind of looks like they smeared some goo on the actor's face. Victor wants to do an old-fashioned villain team up with the Silver Surfer, but the Silver Surfer's like, I'm not a villain, and he blasts Victor through the part of the glacier, with the side effect of the blast seeming to heal Victor's wounds. And Reed discovers more about the Silver Surfer.
Altair 7, Rigel 3, Vega 6, and now they're lifeless, barren, some even shattered. Everywhere the Surfer goes, 8 days later, the planet dies.
So Altair is a bright star in the constellation Aquila, and the planet Altair 7 shows up in a Star Trek video game and a short story. Rigel is a blue supergiant star in the constellation Orion in the Rigel system, and the Rigel system in Rigel 3 also showed up in Star Trek fairly often. And Vega is the brightest star in the constellation Lyra and was also the source of the alien call in the film Contact. Reed also uses this information to determine that the next crater will appear in London, and a crater opens up in the River Thames, and the London Eye tips. Sue forms a force field. Ben lifts it from the base. Reed stretches his body to hold it up from behind, but Johnny gets jumpy when he sees the Silver Surfer and smacks into Reed's body, swapping powers. And so Susan has to smartly create a force field beneath her feet so that she can walk out further over the river, and Reed smartly adapts immediately to having flame powers to melt the Ferris wheel back into place. Meanwhile, Johnny just melts his rubbery flesh into the ground. Useless. But we get a little telltale trickle of blood from Susan's nose, a warning sign that Reed could totally lose her in this movie, and he almost does later. And the River Thames drains, and you know what, there would be all kinds of cool shit at the bottom of this river. Like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of like rival playwrights to William Shakespeare who just like ended it all, and then like skeletons of other mistresses of Henry VIII that he shot out of a cannon into the river. Hager brings in Victor Von Doom, who had recorded his meeting with the Silver Surfer, and learns that his energy originates from the board, and they just need to separate him from the board. Now, this was not the case in the comics. Norrin Radd could fly and use his powers even without the board, although it did help to decrease the amount of energy he exerted during flight. Reed develops machines that create a tachyon pulse that will separate the Surfer from the board.
It'll separate him from his board, making him powerless.
It's like a fish in a net.
But because all we really see here is an extreme close-up of just one device, we don't really know what Hager means by fish in a net. I just found this moment to be a little confusing. But Sue catches Victor making his own device.
What are you doing?
Don't you knock?
Knock on what? There's no door to this part of the lab. Also, he's just making this kind of out in the open where anyone can pass. Also, it's their lab. Sue threatens.
Did you know I could create a force field inside someone's body and expand it until they explode?
How could this movie create that image in our heads and not pay it off later? Johnny tries to flirt with Ray by heating up his body after a shower to make himself steam. He accuses Ray of standing outside the showers waiting for him, but thou doth protest too much, Johnny. I think he chose the showers that were right next to Ray's walking route, and he rehearsed the shit out of this steam move. So they set up a trap in the Black Forest of Germany. These scenes were shot in the same forest that they actually used for various scenes in the first 3 X-Men films, notably the woods scenes in The Last Stand. Hager pulls rank and tries to roast Reed by calling him a loser and saying he didn't even play football in high school, and Reed responds,
No, you're right. I didn't. I stayed in and studied like a good little nerd. And 15 years later, I'm one of the greatest minds of the 21st century. I'm engaged to the hottest girl on the planet. And the big jock who played quarterback in high school, well, he's standing right in front of me asking me for my help.
This speech is taken almost verbatim from the Ultimate Extinction #2 when Reed was talking to Nick Fury. In an early draft of the script, Nick Fury was originally going to play this part, but he's written out and replaced with Hager because of rights issues at the time. Yeah, you know, Kevin Feige was saving Nick Fury for like his eventual Marvel Cinematic Universe where he could finally get Samuel L. Jackson to play the part. The Silver Surfer finds Susan before she can turn her machine on, and she tries talking to him.
Why are you trying to destroy us?
I am not the destroyer.
I really like the visual effect that the Weta artists achieved here, where Susan and her blue suit are reflected in Norrin's body. Just kind of a nice way to show the empathy felt between the characters. But Victor tells Hager to fire. He's like, oh, you didn't have to tell me. And boom, 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 boom. And Norrin protects Sue, a favor that she'll return later. Reed's invention worked, and there's a really cool effect from this point in the movie where the Silver Surfer separated from his surfboard, and you see his skin changes from the shiny metal to the dull graphite color, and you can see more of Doug Jones's facial features. The military questions questions him at an army base in Yakutsk, Siberia, and the Fantastic Four don't appreciate being out of the operation. Now, there is a city named Yakutsk in Russia, though it's spelled with a Y instead of a J, and I doubt that even in 2007 the Russians would have allowed the United States Army base to be built there, even under Black Ops purposes. The Good Wife's Zach Greener plays Mr. Sherman, the torturer. Greener was also in 24, so torturing captives for information is familiar to him. And this film being released in the year 2007 would be around the height of some of the United States' most notorious acts of rendition and enhanced interrogation of suspected terrorist suspects in sites like Gitmo, the heights of which wouldn't fully be known until years after this. Still, there was already a question going around in the public about the lengths the government should go to in order to keep its people safe, and it appears that this film wanted to try to touch on that question too. The Fantastic Four are held in one of these meeting rooms in order to be kept from interfering in the Army's actions with the Surfer. In the room, the whiteboard lists military bases in the United States. The list includes Norfolk, Virginia, Fort Myer, Virginia, Fort Benning, Georgia, also known as Fort Moore, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Polk, Louisiana, now known as Fort Johnson, Fort Detrick, Maryland, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Charles M. Price Support Center, Illinois, as well as ones in Alabama, Arkansas, and Arizona, though we can't see exactly which ones because Ben Graham is too thick. Susan sneaks in to talk to the Silver Surfer.
Come on, you must have a name. I'm Susan.
Yeah, he gives a little tilt of recognition. I think it's just because he now has a name to the face. But you know, the name Susan isn't just specific to Earth because Suisan was the name of Thanos' mother as well as Star Fox's mother. So I don't know, maybe throughout his travels, the Silver Surfer's like, I've heard that name before. Now, the Silver Surfer doesn't reveal his name here, but we find out later in the Fantastic Car that his name is Norrin Radd as it is in the comics. And it's interesting that he won't reveal his name until the Fantastic Four kind of go out on a limb and free him and put themselves at a major risk to their own government. But the Silver Surfer finally gives us some context in the scene by telling us about Galactus with this fun little display from his belly.
My people called it Galactus, the devourer of worlds. It must feed on energy to survive.
He says that serving Galactus spares the Silver Surfer's world and the life of the one he loves, who, he says, Susan reminds him of. He's talking about Shala Bal, Norrin Radd's girlfriend from the comics, but before she became the Silver Surfer herself. And the home world he's trying to save is the home world of Zen La. Now, we recently learned that Julia Garner has been cast to play Shala Bal in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie in 2025 in the MCU. Meanwhile, Lakeith Stanfield is being rumored to play the male Norrin Radd version of the Silver Surfer. As the Galactus cloud passes Saturn and obliterates its rings, it looks like, you'll notice the shadow resembles the antlered helmet of Galactus from the comics. So I choose to believe that there was a Galactus in this movie. We just, he was just outside of frame. The Surfer reveals his board is acting as a beacon and drawing Galactus to Earth, and Victor steals the board for himself and then absolutely obliterates Hager. I feel so bad for Andre Braugher in this moment where he's just kind of frozen in place, but half of his body just kind of cracks and rocks. In the corner, one of the military crates is labeled XM92. Weirdly, that's the same label that was on the crate full of cure cartridges in X-Men The Last Stand. It's almost like they reused the prop. So the Fantastic Four work together to free Norrin Radd, and Reed reveals his latest invention that was under the tarp before. It's the Fantastic Car, the Model 1. That's their flying car from the comics. It's also known as the flying bathtub, and it could split off into 3 pieces. Here you'll notice it has a Dodge logo on it, despite that making no sense if Reed designed it and built it from scratch in his lab, and it's supposed to be top secret, but product placement. And also we get this insane exchange.
Hemi? Of course.
This was based on the Dodge ad campaign that started running in 2004.
Hey! That thing got a Hemi, right? Yeah! Well, now I got a Hemi, too!
I know, but they had to get this movie made somehow. As they chase down Victor Von Doom on the surfboard, and he's having the fucking time of his life. Victor douses Johnny with a column of water, and he aims a blast crater at the Fantastic Car. Reed splits the car up into 3 pieces, and we get this cool chase sequence that rips chunks out of the Great Wall of China. And you could tell in 2007, this was before Hollywood really started to reach out to China for film distribution, and movies didn't care that much about setting destructive battle scenes in Chinese locations. But after Bob Iger really started to go after that with the movies in the MCU, you stopped seeing movies set in China. I believe the fact that X-Men Days of Future Past takes place in the Chinese mountains might be one of the last times you see a Marvel superhero movie really go hard in one of these spots. We see Victor spinning super fast, creating a funnel of wind that scatters a group into the streets of China. And then he creates a spear out of thin air and he hurls it at the Silver Surfer. But Susan, remembering what Norrin Radd did for her in the forest, jumps in front of it with a force field, thinking that she could stop it, but she forgets that Norrin Radd could poke his face through that force field, and so can this spear. And she takes it right in the chest, and then Sue straight up dies. She dies. She's dead. But not for long. So Galactus arrives. We see a giant space cloud that should have wiped out the moon and caused all kinds of gravitational destruction on Earth alone, at least according to those nightmarish reels and TikToks I always get recommended. Johnny says that he can take all of their powers to take on Victor himself.
We don't know what it could do to you.
Let's not make this about me.
Johnny being selfless for once, despite that he's not usually the guy who makes a sacrifice play. Something that the MCU would totally cast against when they developed him as Steve Rogers.
The only thing you really fight for is yourself. You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play.
But there is no explanation to why, when Johnny touched the others before, they swapped powers, but this time he gets to keep all 4 of them? Okay, it looks cool though. This hands-in pose that they create in order to give Johnny their powers resembles the cover of Fantastic Four 524. This image was also in the comic flipping Marvel logo sequence in the first movie. So Johnny uses Sue's invisibility to get close to Victor, and then he gets to say it's clobbering time, using Ben's rock arm to punch his lights out. He uses Reed's stretchiness to catch Victor as he flies through the air after the punch, and then wails on him again. And I kind of feel like this same year, we saw Peter Parker do the same thing when he was like fighting someone, and then he whipped him, and then he punched him again. He's like, I'm not done with you, more! And then as Victor flies through the city, he uses his powers to rip bits out of buildings and projectiles them at Johnny, who grabs onto the top of a building and swings around to get back into the fight to blast him with fire. He turns invisible again and stretches his body around Victor to contain him while he punches him some more, and then he heats himself up so hot that Victor's wrist device that was controlling the surfboard shorts out. Ben wants in on the fun and hijacks a crane and uses it to smack Victor into the water, where all that metal immediately drags him to the bottom. Norrinrad gets his board back and then resurrects Sue. Okay, in the comics he could heal himself as well as others, but he couldn't actually raise someone from the dead. He flies up to the center of Galactus and hands in his letter of resignation.
I will no longer serve. This is the end for us both.
And then he uses all his power to explode Galactus. Now, of course, in the comics, Galactus cannot be destroyed this way. In the Galactus trilogy from the late 60s, Reed has to go all the way out to deep space to find the Great Nullifier and use it in a kind of bargain with Galactus to get him to back off Earth. So by having Silver Surfer just blow up Galactus, it kind of deprives us of seeing the Fantastic Four use more interesting ways to solve their problems. But you know, everything's fixed because the movie has to end. Reed and Sue decide to stay with the team, and they get married in Japan. They fly in Alicia and Minister Brian Posehn for the ceremony. They dress in some questionable garb, but Johnny and Frankie Ray are now dating, despite the fact that she never gave signs of being into him throughout the movie, and he burns the bouquet out of the air before she can catch it, because old habits die hard. He's a heartbreaker. And then the team takes off in the Fantastic car to save Venice from sinking into the Adriatic, and the separating parts of the car, plus Johnny, make a 4 in the sky, where it was just him alone doing it at the end of the last movie. Now all 4 of them take part in giving the people of Japan this eyesore. In the mid-credit scene, it's revealed that the Silver Surfer is still alive and his board is still intact, floating in space. Now this film made over $300 million worldwide, but mixed reviews and the fact that it made less than the previous film led to the 3rd planned film in the franchise getting nixed. Honestly, I think it still might have happened had Kevin Feige not after this point moved on to his own Marvel Cinematic Universe under Marvel Studios. But still, I think we gotta give Tim Story some credit. His predecessor from 2005 was the highest grossing film by a black director up until 2018's Black Panther, which I think is really just a testament to how Hollywood has not given enough talented black directors a chance to make big movies like this. Thankfully, directors like Jordan Peele and Ryan Coogler changed that, and hopefully we're gonna see more and more. Okay, so let's end with some lessons that it seems like Kevin Feige and Matt Shakman will learn from looking back at this movie as they adapt a similar story for 2025's The Fantastic Four in the MCU. Lesson number 1, I think we need to trust the Marvel audience and let Galactus be Galactus. Let him look like Galactus, let him be a true devourer of worlds. If the MCU could make Celestials work in the Eternals film, they could make Galactus work. Okay, second lesson. The Fantastic Four should live in the Marvel world, not our world. This is something Kevin Feige continued throughout phase 1 of the MCU. Characters exist in the world that we know, and there's celebrity cameos, hip, relatable humor, and pop culture references. And as the MCU wore on, that stuff kind of just like went away. It was more of just like a passing fad that came out of the late aughts. And the MCU got better when its boundaries were formed, and settings like the Marvel cosmic landscape that James Gunn defined started to make it seem more real, and we got to go to places like Asgard and Wakanda. And as such, I think the world of the Fantastic Four should be filled with like Marvel characters and Marvel specific things. Okay, next, one good thing that this movie did was its effect sequences and its design of the Silver Surfer, its performance by Doug Jones and the Weta artists. And the power swapping is ultimately really fun because it forces the team to work together. And anytime you get the Fantastic Four to share their power sets and to use their unique skills to solve difficult problems, that's what really lifts the story. And the fact that they get sidelined for the final battle is really where the story kind of falls apart. Whereas as the previous film, Fantastic Four, that's where the story comes together. And I think audiences walked out of that movie feeling better about how it ended, even though the movie as a whole was not as good compared to this movie where they walked out feeling kind of shortchanged. And had it been reversed, I feel like we would have had a third Fantastic Four movie with these actors and this team. And then finally, I think the most important lesson is who is the most important member of the Fantastic Four to nail the casting with? It's not Reed Richards, it's not Johnny Storm, it's not Ben Grimm, it is Susan Storm. And nothing against Jessica Alba, but she is just miscast in this role. And that's why I am so excited to see the MCU Fantastic Four film. I think Vanessa Kirby is the most talented performer of that bunch, but Evan Moss-Backrack is obviously incredible. So is Pedro Pascal, so is Joseph Quinn. But you know, a lot of people are so fixated on Pedro Pascal. Is he the right Reed Richards? That's obviously important, but it's more about his chemistry with his Susan Storm. And Vanessa Kirby is one of our best working actors right now. Okay, I want to give a huge thanks to Brandon Barrick and Gina Ippolito for their help writing the script. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EA Voss, follow New Rockstars, and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.